Start recording. There we go. So, coming up in the next few days, we are going to see what they call a freestyle chess event featuring a number of the top players. It's taking place in Las Vegas, and it's going to be entertaining to the chess world. And so, a little bit of an introduction of what freestyle is. You can see here the board seems to be set up all wrong. This is a position. The main thing about freestyle is you always get the king between the two rooks. The two bishops are on different colours, and the rest of the pieces are randomly placed in the other squares. So there are, if you calculate it, 960 possible layouts of the boards, and it's therefore sometimes called chess 960. It's also often called Fischer Random chess because Bobby Fischer came up with the idea. The issue that we've had with the classical game, and which we had even back in Fischer's day, is that the opening position is so well known, there's so much theory, so much analysis done on openings, that some people think it spoils the game, and that the game could be played up to move 18 with everybody knowing what they're doing. They've seen the positions before, they know all the theory, they've studied it. Some are worried that it's simply the one who's put in the most study work that is going to win the game, or they're going to be able to just force a draw. And in the World Championship series between Magnus, Carlsen and Fabiano Caruana, they played out pretty much well-known openings. There were a lot of draw. Every single game in the classic section was drawn, and so in order maybe to make the game more interesting, we have a position where the players are not, there's no theory, and the players have to work it all out for themselves from the outset. So this is the position I'm going to take you through a game, because I like to present games, and what better than a game between two of the greatest players of chess in the current market. We've got white pieces is Hikaru Nakamura, who is well known, he makes a lot of content, and the black pieces is who is considered like the greatest chess player of the modern era, Magnus Carlsen. He was, of course, the world champion in the time I mentioned, and he's very much into playing with the scrambled pieces, the freestyle chess. So they have very little time to analyse this position. But let me first take you a little bit of the obvious thing you need to do is, as with chess, you need to develop the pieces. You need to especially bring the minor pieces into the game. Make sure the queen and it has lines and isn't locked away. Ideally get the rooks onto open lines, and make sure the king is safe. So the king is close to the edge of the board, but is not at the moment. At the moment, it's between. It's the two rooks are not connected. Were you to want to castle, we can show you how castling works in 960. So I'm just going to play random moves. If you're going to castle on the king's side, for example, I'm just playing some random moves. You'd have to clear out all the pieces between the king and the rook. Queen's out, knight's out, and then you can castle like that on the queen's side, and they end up in the same position as they were before. To castle on the queen's side, you just need to clear this much out. You wouldn't have had to remove the bishops, and then if you swap the two, then they end up in the same position where they would be if you did a normal castling. So this is the castling rule effectively in 960 chess. I've just thrown the pieces out. The moves I've played don't look terrible in essence. Perhaps the biggest side, this knight hasn't yet been developed, the queen is out in the open. This bishop is maybe stuck behind some pawns. If you go back to the other it's the castling. I think the engine's telling me whether the castling was a mad move or not. But we've got this situation, and then you can obviously try to look for more space in the centre. Let's go to the position that what's happened. So white starts the game with e4, which is the most popular move in regular chess. In this position, it helps to get the bishop out. It helps the lines of the queen, and it attacks the central square. Apparently, one of the first things you do is look for vulnerable pawns. So this pawn is the only vulnerable pawn. All the other pawns are currently defended. In the opening position, this pawn is vulnerable. It's not tapped by anything. The Lee Chess database, where 960 game is played at various times, says that this position has been played a number of times, and e4 was the most popular move, followed by d4. On the engine analysis, it thinks that the best move is d4, followed by e3, and then followed by a4, which lets the rook out. It doesn't like the move e4 though. e4 it sees as not the strongest move for white. There is nothing defending this pawn on e4, and you can't. Although you could obviously bring out this knight and it would be defending the pawn, but then the knight wouldn't be able to move to the e4 square itself. d4. And then a4. It really. So you could bring the rook out this route, but it's obviously subjected to the fact that the bishop is going to be controlling this line. The other thing is to just move this pawn all the way up the board. Another option is to try to move the pawn here and then to just bring the king into here and then bring the rook into the game that way. So the king is still near the corner and you've brought out and you're connecting your rooks. In the game itself, we had the move e4 played. This is Hikaru Nakamura has the white pieces. Black immediately challenges with d5, which looks like a Scandinavian opening. With the Scandinavian opening is a sound opening, although it's a bit surprising that it's a sound opening, because it brings the queen out early. The queen can get attacked, but it does challenge the centre. On this occasion, if I take and takes, there isn't a knight that can hop and immediately attack this queen. There's nothing that can immediately attack this queen. I can bring the best move seems to be to bring the pawn here and then to get the bishop out, but that's now blocking the knight's best square. White's actual move is to advance, and I guess the move you'd like to play is to push this pawn up here. But are you going to be allowed to? And the next move played by Magnus Carlsen is to immediately challenge this pawn in the centre. And Hikaru push a pawn. So they're not developing the pieces at the moment. They are pushing pawns out in the game. They are creating lines. The bishops have been noticeably in the middle of the board here. When the bishops and the queen is in the middle of the board. So often you'll find that either one of the bishops or the queen at the edge of the boards, and the obvious thing is to open the diagonal for it. But on this occasion, the bishops and the queen, like in a regular standard game, are both more central, and you can free them both with central pawn pushers. So it's not surprising that the players are doing that in this position. One of the things I've heard of in this game is they look very much for pawn chains. So they try to create certain types of pawn chains. They often consider that a more important thing than looking at the piece, the gaps for the pieces. G5 is a move which is allowing the bishop to come out this way. It allows the knight to come in. I mean, the king's safety isn't an issue because the king's quite actually tucked away in the corner at the moment. So central space, lines for the pieces seems to be the main order of the day. Yeah. We get an exchange of pawns, and white now brings a bishop into the action. The first piece enters the board. It's attacking this pawn here. As I said, that pawn is the one that's undefended. A very simple knight move to g6 or would defend it. Bishop to g6 is played. That's not actually considered the best move by got a top move by the engine. And at the moment in the Lee chess database, we reached already in 5 moves. We actually reached on this move of f6. We've reached the move, the first, already reached position that has never been reached before on the Lee chess database. I don't know about chess.com's 960 games. Called the novelty, that move, when you reach a position that's never been reached before. Rook goes to f1, and white is trying to build up the attack here, I guess. White has no plans to castle on the king side with black, because the lines are open, everything's pointing there. The king is probably safest where it is. Magnus develops a knight into the board. White now plays this strange move of b3, and the only thing I reckon he wants to do is maybe move the king out here to connect the rooks, but what the engine is pointing to this move. The bishop comes in here, which and now you can see the point of his move. He's bringing the bishop into c3, and he's going to probably tuck it back into b2 to get a standard fianchetto. The pawn on the queen side is pushed, which helps let the rook out, and also at the same time looks at attacking the king, because white can no longer castle on the king side, but black can. White plays the f4 break. We get another move of the pawn and captures on the queen side, so a king side castling is never going to happen for black now. Magnus. Queen moves out of the game. Black moves his rook into the open file. An exchange happens, and that lets the knight into the game, and as white now forces a bishop trade, black pushes on the king side. This knight is defending this knight, so it can't take the pawn, and the threat is to move here, and this knight will be, the knight would have to move away from the other knight. So white addresses that by defending the knight on e2, and black attacks the knight, and white withdraws his knight, and next the queen enters into the position. Black's position is got the val bar. You can see black's position on the right hand side is better. Magnus is better placed in this game. As this drops down from here down the board, it shows he's winning, it shows he's much better. When it gets to this line, he's winning completely, and when it's at the bottom, it means he's pretty much won the game. G3 to kind of unlock the position. The knight, at this point, Magnus's best move appears to be to develop the rook this way, is being suggested, after which you can possibly move the knight back here and start attacking with the king here. And so he wants to bring the knight into this over to here, I would guess. Let's bring everything back to over to the side where the kings are. The queen comes back, and no, he wants to bring the knight to this square. Now attacking, putting pressure on the pawn, putting pressure on this pawn, and possibly looking to go there. Our white castles, which moves the king further from the corner, but it does bring the rook into more into the centre. Takes, and we take with this pawn, defends the pawn here. Knight comes back. brings his knight into the game, and there's a threat to bring the knight here on e4, which may be what the whole thing was about, getting the knight to this square. White defends it by putting his knight there, so the knight comes here anyway. He has to take, because otherwise he loses the exchange. Black takes back and he's threatening the fork here. So he puts the knight into the square where the fork was where the pawn was aiming to go, and black brings his knight to challenge that. At this point the value bar has gone almost back to equal. So Hikaru has improved his position. We get exchange there, and then we get a exciting sacrifice time. And it's what with chess.com might call a brilliant, but actually it's, although it doesn't lose, it's interesting. Stockfish didn't see this move, but when it sees it, it's given it as a move as good as the ones that came before. So we now take the knight. He sacked exchange. King comes in, the queen comes in with a check. The rook blocks, but that's not the right move. Apparently, king to b2, and the position is saved. But putting the rook in front is red tomatoes. But his mine is not 0.9. It's not completely lost. The val bar has moved from being equal to equal. The val bar's moved down to here. Better for white. He takes, and if we do a quick count of the pawns, he's got 4 pawns on the board. White's got 4 pawns on the board. But if he exchanges the queens and takes this pawn, black will have an extra pawn, which is significant enough. But taking isn't the solution. The solution is to come queen to d5, and Magnus finds this move. And he's putting pressure on this pawn with a hope to promote this. White exchanges here, and instead of taking that pawn, he should take this pawn now, and he's winning. But he doesn't, and he takes this pawn, and there's the advantage lost again. These games I think were played with a rapid time control, but I'm not sure on the exact time control. This game was played in Paris back in April. Escapes, and we get e3, and he's ready to march. And you might think that once all the casting's done, all the pieces are out, we get a normal standard game of chess. But the patterns of the game, where the attacks are happening, the imbalances of pawns, all this sort of stuff all over the board, is pretty much new to 960. It's patterns you've seen, and tactics you've seen, but it's also structures that you're not used to, and so that's part of the excitement of the game. So the material's equal here. Black has a pawn which is very advanced going down the middle. If he can, white's got some things scattered around. Queen comes. You can't simply take it, because this move forks the king and rook. So that's not that would be a complete blunder. The king goes to c2, rook comes into the action, rook takes, rook goes to e, so when the queen comes back. d5 is not even marked as a blunder, but it appears to. Let's look at how the value bar moves with d5. And this is really, 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 really weird, because the engine is at the moment saying d5 is the top move. And as soon as it's played, the value bar goes down enormously, suggesting that he was losing all along, because there's no other good moves here. So even Stockfish is confused here. I've got the depth of 27. Can I get the depth to go higher? Can I get I've got infinite search time, but it's taking a long time given how many... I'm probably going to kill my whole computer doing this, and probably OBS is going to crash. I'm still on a depth of foot 27, but it's really, really strange. As soon as I played D5, here it says now it is 1.9, and we play the move, and then it says we played the best move, and it says it's 0.7. He then plays his best move, and all of a sudden it's minus 2.7. So, kind of saying, stop fish, make up your mind. It's 27 depth there. When I move here, it's 30 depth. It's like, I don't think it's actually still calculating. It says max depth reached. And you need one of those mega computers with lots and lots of lines. It's flashing away and it's giving me trouble. So let's reduce the calculating power here. There we go, 7 threads back to there. At this point, it's Queen takes E3, say, is the only move that makes it a game here. And then after Rook takes A2, I have to go here, and then black can, there's a pin here, and black can do best if he activates, no, not there, there. Is the only move that's better for black. So what did he play here? All bites up a pawn, but where's the, let's have a look. Rook comes to A2, the king moves, the queen comes into C1, and now the king escapes, and B6 threatens mate. Queen comes to defend it, and that's just, well, if you come here, there's an en passant, so that's not the problem. But the queen comes to here, and then, well, we're just repeating moves, are we? And then after repeating a few moves, king to B7. Queen goes back, rook comes into the attack, and white's up a pawn, but black's got a very weak king, and king check there. King moves to what isn't the best square. Queen to G4, and a few more moves, and white's king's gonna, it looks like it, well, he's been walking around the board, but it looks like he's gonna get checkmated in currently mated in 15, and it looks like Hikaru resigns at this point. So there we go, that's a freestyle game, and tune in for what's going to happen in Vegas, where Magnus Carlsen is playing, Hikaru Nakamura is playing. I think Gukesh may be playing, Fabiano Caruana may be playing, I think maybe, and Hans Niemann is playing because he qualified. So follow the chess, let it all speak for itself.